next 30 minutes or so and sharing some information, but then we're going to give you an opportunity to ask questions. And you can notice on the bottom of the Zoom, if you're on the Zoom, obviously you would be, I guess, there's a chat function on the bottom. And so we do have a team standing by where you can send those questions to David and I, and we can see them right here on the iPad that we have in front of us. So basically, that way we can communicate and ask the questions that you may have, you answer the questions you may have. So David and I want to introduce, this is David Briggs, and he's my partner in Tricord Global. And so today we're going to talk to you a little bit about our journey and what we're doing. And so David, you and I, Tricord Global now is 12 going on 13 years old. Yep. since we've started it. It's been a blessing. And so why don't you talk a little bit about our journey and our mission?
Well, I was involved in global missions and different nonprofits and things for years.
Yeah, you managed $1 million a year budget just or more in some years
in one organization.
Organization in global missions.
And then you had contacted me and told me that you were interested in doing some things with business, connected with business and kingdom, not just charitable giving. That was back in 2008 or whenever it was.
2007.
And so you began to go on a journey. In fact, I think it'd be good maybe if you because a lot of people that are attending probably don't know the journey and how we got started. So maybe you could just share a little bit about your journey to starting Tricord.
Well, my passion was I observed, David, he and I have known each other since we were actually teenagers. And so we go back that far. And so my journey was, I was reasonably familiar, of course, with missions around the world, global missions, very close to you. You were doing it every day somewhere in the world. And so what I wanted to do was take what most people call missions and the other people call business, right, and marry the two, where we actually put an empowerment type model together where people could be empowered but use business principles to build it, to be able to raise capital and that kind of thing, and also business principles overseas when we applied it. And the real reason for that, David, was we talked about it, was we wanted to see something sustainable on the ground, because what really happened was we would come back here to America and you would raise money for missions, and you would go back overseas and to deploy the money. What we wanted to do is that if we raised the dollar over here on the investment side, we wanted to keep that dollar in that country so it continued to be multiplied over and over again. So, for example, in missions money, when you give it, which is a blessing, let's just say that, we're grateful for missions giving, but what happens is then you go and you give that dollar away. But when we go into the country, we invest that dollar and people pay the dollar back, and they do it with what we call a sustainable interest rate. Then that dollar can be, I don't have to come back to America and raise that money again. Now I've got that money in that country, and that dollar can be lent again. And really, we say it can be lent 20 times. It's lent in infinity because we never actually take that actual dollar back out of the country. We leave it there really for perpetuity. And so when you look at that, we believe God has given us a model that is not just giving people a handout, but it's giving them a hand up.
Exactly. And that's the thing that was kind of frustrating or challenging to me was the idea that everything was dependent on subsidy giving, whether it was donation or any other way that come. And it's like sticking your finger in water. Once it's settled, you can't tell it's been there. A lot of activity, but nothing moving forward. So there was a lot of people who came to faith in Christ and who were bettered in their lives, but their conditions never changed. The community never changed. The influence in the communities and the nations. And I had a huge heart for mission, for kingdom building. So when we began to talk about the mission of Tricord and how to make sustainable giving and changing, people's lives, nations, and empowering them. And I saw so many failed businesses and failed ideas that happened over there, or subsidy money be cut off, that it was just nothing ever really changed to move people forward in their lives.
Right.
And so when you began to talk with me about Tricord and what you were feeling, it was just like a perfect marriage in my mind, where you could do missional work, whether it's social impact, Christian missions or whatever, but you can make a sustainable difference in the community and people's lives themselves.
Yeah, and so what God showed us how to do was to raise capital on this side, and basically the whole principle behind it is some people can take not just their income money that they make on a job and give, but if they have any wealth, money they've accumulated, they can invest it, and then they can, with us, you usually invest 5 to 7 years, and then there's a return you get paid back depending on how long you invest and the amount of money you invest. You can make somewhere between 4 and 8% in an annual return. And just let me just say this quickly here: yes, you can invest using an IRA. So we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
In fact, we'll talk about that in detail a little bit later here in the webinar. But I just want to say, David, one of the things that's been so exciting is the empowerment of the clients. And one of the ways that we empower those overseas whenever we're lending the money. And by the way, we only do capital, what we call a capital raise, what we're doing now, we only do it twice a year. And so we limit the time. It usually lasts anywhere from 3 to 4 weeks, because then we make our commitments overseas, but to how much money we're going to actually give in that period of time. But what happens is when the people receive it overseas and those kind of loans happen, I said last night on live Bible study, our lowest loan we've ever done to a client is $50 US, and our largest loan has been about $70,000, and now we've actually added to that particular $70,000, and now on that particular loan it's about $100,000. But we educate, we teach them business principles.
Yeah, that's the beauty of it. It's not just lending money. Everything has a cost factor in it. And so what happens with a client comes and they might have a good business idea. They might have a tremendous influence in the community, but they're not economically active. It's not just they don't have money, because there's a $2.6 trillion deficit in emerging markets. People don't have access to capital, and they can be the most astute entrepreneurial person in the world, but if you don't have access to capital, you can't move forward. And so what we found was a target-rich environment where we could take and strategically place funds. So the journey of the client, real quickly, is they come, they learn about Tricord or our partners that we're partnering with, like the bank or the credit union or the other businesses. And what happens is they go through a whole system. They go through, they get it, whether it's individual lending or whether it is group lending, they get in an environment where they become economically active. They get pre-loan training where they learn strategic things about how to manage money, how to take care of debt, have budgeting, negotiation. And they have a system and relational involvement that they go through this pre-loan training. Then they get their loan. There's a utilization checks where they go through, they find out if their loan's being applied. They meet on a regular basis, whether they're coming together in a meeting or whether whether the loan officers or the community development officers are going there on their businesses, and they help problem solve. They teach them how to scale their business, pay their loan. And here's the interesting thing about a client: it's just not borrowing money. They don't get money just to borrow it. They can pay their loan back. They learn how to save money. They learn how to grow and scale their business, but they also have to be able to take something out personally for income to improve their lives, whether it's paying for the children's education or whether it's building a home, drilling wells. And as a result, they become the influencers in the community, not only in the churches, but in the community as well.
Yeah, because we had a lady that's way out, we call it in the bush, out in the bush, I forget the name of a small place, but she actually started and came. And by the way, I think most of you who are tuning in here to the webinar, you know that we're, of course, a Christ-centered, faith-based organization, Tricord Global. This lady was actually a Muslim. She got born again, and she came to a place where we provide capital. And over a period of time, she did 6 different loans. A single lady in the village. She was impoverished. She had nothing. Through the process of her building the business, and so she started those small grocery stands in town, right? And then she moved it to like a little hardware type store. They actually became stores. They had these actual buildings, and the stores were in them. And today she is like the community chief. We would call it over here. We would call it like a county commissioner. And so the way God blessed her and empowered her, and that whole village, that entire village of people has turned to Christ during that period of time. And because she became empowered financially, and then she was born again, right? And then through that process, she really began to share with other people, of course, the story of Christ, but also of economic empowerment.
Yeah.
So that was a powerful.
Well, her story is in Nachi Fuma, Uganda. And what was so important about that is she not only provides potable drinking water, but she works with underprivileged children, and she also works with individual ladies in the community. She does a lot of social outreach. And that made me think about, in our second cycle of loans back when we first started, we had 12 Muslim ladies come to Christ.
That's right.
And I remember one of them sent us an email saying,
that was in Kenya.
That was in Malawi.
Malawi.
And she made the statement, she said, she sent us an email, she said, I didn't know, never dreamed that I could do business with Christians. So she actually did business with Christians.
As a Muslim.
Through her business ethics teaching, she came to faith in Christ, started going to church, and then she was able to provide for her family. But we had 12 individuals that were Muslim that came to faith in Christ through business ethic teaching. So the nature of Christian business is always kingdom transformation. So you have the journey of the client, you have our journey, and you have funds. Bill, I think it'd be good if we could just maybe talk a little bit about what is the mechanism, or what type of investments, or how does the investment side of it work? And maybe you could talk a little bit about the funds and the investment of the Tricord.
Yeah, so basically the way the concept works is the minimum investment in Tricord Global is if it's just a cash investment where someone makes an investment directly, in cash with a check or whatever, some kind of instrument that you bring cash, then the minimum amount of investment is $20,000. If you're investing from an IRA, the minimum investment is $25,000. Now, here's how the concept works. So basically, you would basically invest, or in essence, you receive a promissory note, which I'll show in just a second. But you invest, let's say, the median investment in Tricord Global is $100,000. Now, if you don't have $100,000, don't let that go, oh, well, I'm not worthy. Or no, God takes the small, but we had to limit the smaller investments down to 20,000 just because of being able to service the clients on both sides of the pond appropriately. So you can do it with a cash investment, or you can do it through an IRA. And then what you receive, we have an investment packet here that looks like this. And when you open this particular packet, you open it on the inside. Here on the right side, we actually have on the right side, if you look, there's actually an investment interest form. So you can contact us, and you can send an email. And have we shared the email? Is that on the screen, or how do we do that? On the email? Would they go to info?
They're going to receive an email after with the.
So they'll receive an email. How do they contact us?
Through that email.
That email will take them to a link where they can contact.
And so where is that email?
So they'll be receiving an email from us, from the team. We'll send it out an email.
Yes.
And then.
Okay, so you can send in, say you want it, I guess, on the Zoom chat, and then they'll send you an email. And so basically then here's an interest form, but if you let us know an email, you don't need to do the interest form. And then on this side, there's an actual, we call it offering circular, that lets you know exactly what we're doing and what the investment looks like, and explains it to whoever would like to know, explains the investment. Then behind that, there's instructions for an IRA. If you're interested in investing through an IRA, it tells you that. And then in the packet, in addition to that, you also receive on this side, it's called an application and investment agreement that you as the investor would fill out. It's several pages, but it gives you a ton of information in there. And then you'll receive back, if you make an investment, you'll receive back from us a promissory note. If you're making a cash investment, you receive this directly. If you're making an IRA investment, then your IRA custodian, which we will help you with, by the way, setting up what's called a self-directed IRA, that then the IRA custodian will receive the note. You'll receive a copy of your note in your hand. But remember, IRAs act literally as a third person. That's the reason they're taxed a certain way. For example, if you made early withdrawals or something like that. But we can help you with all the IRA information. So basically, you invest that amount of money. The shortest amount of time that you can invest for is for 5 years. And then the longest amount of time that you can invest for is 7 years. So you can invest 5, 6, or 7 years. And so depending on the amount of money you invest and how long you invest. So inside of here, when you look at the offering circular and at the investment agreement, it lists in there exactly. So if I open it, for example, since we're doing the webinar, and I come back here and I look at the app, well, let me get over here to the circular, because that would be in the circular, we explain everything to you, the notes, how they work, about the Tricord Global Fund, right? So all of this is in there. Then I come over here to the actual note that I had in here, and if I look in here, there's actually a chart. And that chart, when you look in here in both places, when you look at the chart, it'll show you. So for example, if you invested, let's say, $25,000 for 5 years, so that's your shortest term, and that's your minimum amount in an IRA, you would make, and then here's the chart right here. I know you can't see it on the computer, but just to show it to you, here's the chart. You just kind of see it. So if you invested $25,000 for 5 years, you get 4%. If you invested $100,000 for 7 years, you get 8%. And then you get percentages all between. If you did 50,000, let's say if you did 50,000 for 5 years, you would get 5%. If you did 100,000 for 5 years, you'd get 6%. And you get, so each year it steps up to the maximum amount is 8%. And then we're kind of sharing the technical part, and then you can decide whether you want to be paid quarterly your interest. So for example, just to keep it simple, if you were going to invest $100,000 for 7 years and it was a cash investment, you would make a simple interest rate of 8%. And if you decided to get a quarterly payment, then you would get $2,000 per quarter on that note. Okay, $2,000 per quarter. So if you did $50,000 for 7 years, your interest rate would go down, right? So it'd be lower, but you would get a little less than $1,000 per quarter, and so you get paid. Or you can choose to compound annually. So I would say with all of our investors, it's about half and half. About half choose to compound it, and the other half choose to receive quarterly payments. So if you're someone watching who's at retirement or close to retirement, unless your investment is in an IRA, if it's in an IRA, I would say 90% of people in IRAs will actually take the compound note, right? And I would say about 3/4 of those who make cash investments actually take the quarterly payment. So, you can choose to do that. And so that's how mechanically the actual investment works. And so do you think that was good today?
Yeah, I think, and if you say, well, that's a lot of information at once, just remember that everyone will receive an email at the end of the webinar. Simply click the link that's provided in the email, and we will follow up with information about investing in Tricord. So to understand, we're talking about investments. Maybe you say, well, that's the global note, but what is there other ways to give? Absolutely. We have a charitable gift annuity, for example. Maybe you're don't want to invest, but you want to leave a legacy gift. So you can make a gift or to Tricord, to Global Mission Society or Tricord, and then what happens is that gift is put in an irrevocable trust, and then you get payments out of the annuity side for the rest of your life. It's called single payment. So you give a gift, it's a donation, plus you get the tax break for that gift, tax credit, and you'll need to talk to your your CPA, or you talk, because tax situations vary from person to person. But if you're interested in a charitable gift annuity, what happens is that you receive regular monthly payments For example, just this is just an example. If you're saying you're 60 years old and you're given a $100,000 gift, and you would get $20,000 or $30,000 in tax deductions. You'd get your monthly gift. Your monthly income would come at about 6%.
And the tax deduction would be the year of the gift.
Right, and well, it can move forward too. It can be rolled forward.
Right.
And then once you pass away, then the balance of that, whatever that balance is, would go toward Tricord, its mission. So there are ways to give, not just in the note. And let me just say this, Bill, and talk about just for a second. In investing, a lot of people say, well, social impact investing, that means that you're just investing in companies that don't do things that are morally adverse to what I believe. Well, that is corporate responsibility and social investing, where a lot of people say, I want to put my money in funds and stuff that's not adverse to my morals or my values. That's social investing. But social impact investing is you're putting your money strategically in a place where it is actually doing social impact work, whether it's like for Tricord, for example, we're affecting communities, building civically responsible people, training them. So there's a little bit of difference there. We're not talking about just social investing. We do have corporate responsibility, but we're talking about social impact investing, where you do the investment, and then the investment is placed into Tricord, which is put into actual social impact change, nation building, which is a little bit different. I just want to make that distinction right quick.
Yeah, making an impact. So a couple of things on the technical side, on a couple of questions that came, and one is it possible to use my IRA to invest in Tricord Global? That came from chat, and the answer is yes. And what must happen is your IRA has to be rolled over into what we call a self-directed IRA. Now, addressing 401ks, 401ks can also be rolled over if you haven't worked for because the 401k is set up with an employer. So if someone has not if you haven't worked for your employer for 6 months or more, then that IRA, then that 401k can be rolled over into basically a personal IRA, which would be a self-directed IRA. And then another question that we have, we're going to come back and talk about some more specifics here in just a second. Also social impact, I want to talk about that. But another one says, what's the risk? How long have you been doing this type of investment, and have you ever defaulted? I think that's from Lyndon. And so Lyndon, no, we have never defaulted. Everyone has always been paid back. Now, and they ask, what's the risk? The risk is high. So meaning that we're making these investments primarily today in Africa. So when we mention Kenya and Malawi and Uganda, that's all on the continent of Africa where we primarily do that. Now, we've done it in Colombia and some other countries, but right now we're focused primarily in Africa. And so when people ask the risk, well, compared to investing, let's say in a normal U.S. company, then the risk investing in Africa is high. But Lyndon, let me address that. That's the reason that we pay the 4 to 8%. If you just put your money in a CD, right, you're going to make anywhere from 0.3 to 0.5%. If you put it in some type of money market, you may make as high as 2.5%. Some very limited cases, it may be 3%. Money market accounts are they're safe, right? And up to a certain amount of money, $250 or so, in some cases even higher, they're actually insured by the government. But this is actually a social impact investment. We've never defaulted. We've never missed an interest payment at any time, because we have certain things and principles that we operate by to make sure that we're able to meet our obligations, as well as that our investments are sound investments. And then how long have you been doing this type of investment? Since 2008. And have you ever defaulted? No, we have never defaulted at any time. So far the Lord has directed us and helped us. But what I want to say to you here today, since we're getting this kind of question, remember here, this is actually a loan. So you're making a loan to Tricord Global with terms spelled out in the promissory note that I showed you. And so you'll get paid back. You know, I always say when you make an investment, right, there's two things you need to understand, right? You need to understand how much your investment is and what you're going to earn on the investment. And then the second thing is you need to know how and when you're going to get paid back. And so we spell that out in detail. And we have many investors over the years who have renewed with us, just continued to renew. Some of them choose to get their interest payment. Some of them choose to receive that interest payment every quarter. They renew their note. Some others have compounded, and they renew their note after they receive their interest. So anyway, that's one of the first questions. We have several questions. So if you're here, I'm actually kind of that's pretty good at the question. So if you have some others, I'll read a couple more here in a second that are coming in. But if you have any questions, just make sure that you ask them. And there's another one here I see from Teresa, and it says, could you please talk to the plan for succession for Tricord Global when a person invests for 10 years? Well, first of all, Teresa, I'll talk about succession. But first of all, let me say we don't take investments for 10 years. We only take investments for 7 years. That's the max amount of time. And then how can they be assured the fund will continue to be managed after your heart? So one of the things we have is we actually have a board here in Tricord Global, and that board is responsible for giving oversight to what we're doing. And inside of Tricord, we do have a succession plan, but candidly, that's the reason there's two of us. If something happens to one, the other one's here. But we also have long-term plans for succession as well. And so right now, you want to say something?
I was going to say that the simply quick answer to that is everything that we do is captured within our governance. And our governance doesn't change or drift in its mission with just personnel. So I just want you to know that the mission or the vision isn't just some talked out talking point. It's within the governance and structure of the note, of our corporation, of its mission, its objectives, and that's what guides the boundaries to what we do with the fund. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So then, so we're protected on both sides in the succession plan, including on who the heart of who's going to direct it, and that kind of thing. And so we have several others, but before I get to some of those, let's talk for a second. I want to talk a little bit about Samuel. I want to talk about Samuel in Uganda and Farm Uganda and what we were able to do through Tricord with that.
Yeah, the loans aren't just with the individual loans in the bank. We have, with Samuel Farm Uganda, he's gone into an area to where we've invested and they bought tractors. You've actually been out on the land.
I've been on the land, and one thing I'll say about that is when we do these business loans, which many of them are, there's many individual loans as well. That's why people is low. But when we do business loans, and many of the individual loans are actually collateralized, and that means with real collateral. Now, some of the smaller loans, we use a different form of collateral we call social capital, and our social collateral, and that social collateral is they actually invest from a group, and then the group has to guarantee everybody's loan. But when it gets bigger, larger, we actually do collateral loans. So in Samuel's place, we actually bought the farmland really cheap compared to what it's worth. This is one example, only one. We bought the farmland really cheap, and because of that, in Samuel's case, the farmland is worth more than what is actually owed on the loan. So basically, the loans are collateralized. Plus, on the contribution side, donation side, we bought 2 tractors and a trailer for him on the farm that many of our partners and even some investors gave and donated to. So we gave that to him. We gave 1 tractor, a trailer, and a plow to him. We donated it to them, and so we try to do both sides. But I'm right now I'm speaking to the fact that most of the business loans that are anywhere above $1,000 or so, they are collateralized with real assets, hard assets, not just something like a tractor or something like that, but they're actually collateralized with houses and land and that kind of thing. So we actually have collateral.
Yeah, and the nature of those businesses, like with Samuel, they're actually doing training, agricultural training. They actually have schools. They provide the food for the children's meals. They're contracted out that way. They do a tropha planting around the property they're experimenting with right now, where they can take the fruit of the tropha tree and they can not just do barrier protection planting, but they can also convert that to diesel fuel and lighting fuel. So there's a lot of different things. I guess what I'd say about that, Bill, is there's the investment side and the mechanics of the loan. So we have the investment money, and then we have also the partners and stuff. We do kingdom investment out of partner money, but we don't mingle the two. Is the point? We don't take investment money and put it where it can't be deployed or where it's at high risk.
Right.
That's what I think people need to understand. Is we drilled a couple of years ago. We drilled 5 wells.
Right.
Those wells were strategic community and provided potable water for thousands of people and helped put down the amount of disease that were waterborne diseases in children. But that was all done out of capital. That community development was done out of capital that was not investment capital.
Right.
And so, because I know Teresa asked the question also, I believe it was from Teresa. She said you have certain periods that you offer the investments and certain periods that you don't. She was curious about. Could you please talk about what precipitates opening the fund for new investments, and when this happens, is it a positive indication? And I think that it is a positive indication of growth, but also we take capital only as that capital can be responsibly deployed, because we have a fiduciary responsibility to vet where all investment capital goes.
Right, and so how that works, I think this is important for everyone to understand, is how it works is I mentioned that we pay the 4 to 8%, when you invest with us. So the way it works, and this is important to understand, so if you're with us this far in the webinar, which I believe you are because of the questions that are coming in, this is something real important to understand, is that we actually receive back approximately 12% on the money that we deploy. So even at the highest interest rate of 8%, there's a gap there of 4%. And somebody says, what do you do with the 4%? Well, that's what we operate Tricord with. So one of the things that you have to understand is that capital has to be sustainable. And so in the sustainable piece, stay with me one more time, it's 4 to 8% is what we pay here, and they pay us 12%. Now, before you fall out on the floor and say, wow, 12% is a lot of money, remember that the central bank lending rate in Uganda is 16%. And then remember that if you go in as a well-collateralized, high-profile client, and you want to borrow money from Barclays Bank in Uganda, they're going to pay you, they're going to charge you 24 to 30% annual interest. That is if you're a client that already has many assets. Not very few of any clients that we've ever serviced could actually get a loan at Barclays, regardless of how small or how big it is. They just wouldn't qualify. Okay, so what happens is people in America and in Western nations have such a hard time understanding this. If you look at central bank rates, for example, and you look at what they're lending at. So, for example, in America, the central lending bank rate in America within the last 7 years has been close many times to 0%. That means they are lending to banks in the country for almost no interest whatsoever. Now it's gone up a little bit, but not a lot. So when you hear reading the paper or you're watching the news and they talk about the Fed lowering the rate, we call it 25 basis points, right? They bring it down by 0.25%, and they bring it down. Well, ladies and gentlemen, if you're watching here today, Americans, Western people, have no concept of the kind of interest rates that are paid at higher levels.
Yeah, and part of that's because banks here in America can lend up to 10 times their core capital.
Yeah, and during the heyday, they were lending up to 35 times. That's why they failed.
And we're debt driven. And banks in most developing countries are capped in their core capital at 80%. So all the capital is sucked up by the larger companies. So one, they don't qualify for the loan, or even if they qualified for the loan, they couldn't get it because the money's not available. So that's why we call it a target-rich environment. And the way we structure our notes with our clients, this is really important. The banks would never structure the notes the way we structure them. So the way we structure the payments, they can deploy their principal over 3 to 5 years and make that money work for them, with their payments being smaller the way we structure it, where it's not just a straight up amortized loan.
Right.
So what happens is they can make their money work for them without having these massive payback. So their cash flow is freed up to grow their businesses. You can't even get that over here. It's better than hard money lending.
So it's much better than hard money lending. So there's a couple of questions here from chat. Does this work like a CD where the investment is payable on death to my children? So on the bottom here, I hope you stayed with us because it looks like that one, I'm not sure if that one came in first or what, but on the bottom of the investment agreement, there is a place where you can put your beneficiary and those kind of things for you. And so basically you can designate who you want this to go to upon your death. So that's here in the agreement as well. And then another one says, how do you ensure that the money's being used for the business intended? And do you send updates to investors on how the money is being utilized? Can you guys give me a magazine? And so basically we send out a magazine twice a year. That's a 32-page full-color magazine that actually explains what we're doing and where it's happening. And we also now are just starting in 2020 an actual newsletter. So you'll receive regular updates that come from us in the newsletter, but just historically, can somebody hand that to me? Thank you so much. So this is the magazine we send out. It has Becky and I on here, but inside of it, in fact, you can see Tricord Global right on the back of the magazine. And then inside of the magazine, you'll see reports that are coming in based on the investments. You also will see here in this particular magazine, we talk about philanthrovesting, which is Tricord Global. And so all of those things, you'll get reports. You'll actually see pictures and hear testimonies from other investors.
No, when you're finished.
No, okay. Yeah. And so I think all those things are important for them to see.
Yeah, and someone had asked about the risk. Let me just say this: all investments, because there was a question about does this work like stocks and bonds, and what's the difference? Just all investment carries some risk, and so the higher the risk, the higher the reward. But you have to determine what your risk level is,
right.
And if your risk inverse, so I guess in speaking to risk. There is no investment anywhere that's 100% safe from any kind of default.
Right.
So you have to
unless
understand
you put it in government,
well, you put it in municipal bonds or government bonds, and even in municipal bonds, Detroit went bankrupt.
Sure.
So, but you have to determine your if you're risk adverse, and that's something that's really. I just wanted to get that out there that all investments carry risk.
So the way it's treated from a tax perspective, if you invest with an IRA, then it has the same guidelines and requirements that an IRA anywhere will have. If you invest with cash and it's important to know this, and you actually receive a quarterly payment, then that payment is treated to you like interest income. And you'll receive a 1099 INT at the end of the year with the payments that you received. If, in fact, let's see, there was another one and then if, in fact, you invest with an IRA, as I said, it's actually treated like an IRA. So basically, one more time, let me do this one more time, people have to hear it. So you can take the money, you can invest from either a cash investment Our median investment, that means if 10 people walk through the door, 7 out of 10 invest $100,000. But we have many people at 25 or 50 or 75. Now, when you can invest with cash or you can invest through an IRA, either way. The interest rate that you receive, the minimum for cash investment is $20,000. For an IRA, the minimum investment is $25,000 because the IRA costs us more in fees, et cetera, to do the investment. Then, when you invest, you can receive on that investment either quarterly interest payments. We pay simple interest, or you can compound annually and receive your interest at the end of the note. We pay 4 to 8% depending on the money that you invest, and you get paid either quarterly or you get paid in compound, which is at the end of the note. It's your choice. You get to choose. You get to decide what it's going to be. Then we loan the money, we deploy the money based on our systems and how we evaluate the investment of the banks we're working with, et cetera, the microfinance institutions. In fact, we just had one of the largest operators in Africa, in Kenya, who works directly with over 500 microfinance institutions that have contacted us about loaning them capital. Well, the way we do it is first of all, they have to be Christ-centered. They have to be faith-based in the sense of the Christian faith. And they have to be faith-based. Now, we still will loan to people outside of the Christian faith, but we do that more as an evangelistic outreach to touch them in their lives with the gospel. And so then those institutions pay us back that are approximately 12%. Sometimes it's a little more, but sometimes it might be a tad less, not a lot. And so we average about 12%, and our average loan that we have to pay back here, if we put them all together and shake them up, it runs about 7%. So that's what we're loaning. So we're really loaning collectively at about 7% to you, would be about 7% we're paying back, and we're making collectively 12%. So there's a 5% spread there, so you understand, it's important you understand how the money works, okay? And so that's how it works. And so it works like a CD in the sense that you do receive interest, but look, in a CD right now, if you have a good CD, you might get as high as 2 to 2.5%. Well, there's a lot of difference, and that's in a $100,000 CD. You put $100,000 in for 7 years, that's actually 8%. And believe me, the difference between 8% and 2.5% is dramatic. So really, I took what I was learning in business and real estate investing and other things, and I took the knowledge, and we put this together. So now I noticed that Abraham asked, do we have plans to go to other areas with Tricord? And so I'll let you address that.
And that's a great question, because we wanted to make sure that our model was sound, our systems were sound, and I get emails on a weekly basis from institutions, Christians, from missionaries, lending institutions, microfinance, people asking us to partner with them. So we vet those places. We're looking into Asia right now. We're looking into the areas of Fiji, Vietnam, Southeast Asia, Latin America. So we're vetting those places now. We believe we have a strong model. Our questions become: can you take to those institutions? Can you take the money, the funds? Can you deploy the capital? Like you said, do they partner with the same faith-based position? And so we're ready to expand. The answer is yes, but what we do in a responsible way is that we will only expand to the degree that we know the funds can be deployed and that they are strategically placed. So we keep we don't just throw money somewhere where it's going to get eaten.
Yeah. So even though we're faith-based, let's be clear, we do not do loans through churches,
Right,
etc. Now we do loans for churches. So if churches want to borrow money, for example, and in some cases we actually donate, not from Tricord funds, but our other organization called Wealth Builders, we actually donate sometimes to help churches in different parts of the world. But from the standpoint of Tricord, there are some churches in other parts of the world can't get capital, and they may need a little larger amount of capital that can't be raised from donation funds for the time, and we will loan that to churches. But the point I'm making is we don't loan through churches.
No.
Because there's a too much of a devotional aspect. By devotional, we mean people think it's a gift. And so what we have to do is there's a question here on how we run the bank. So our primary bank is called Glotrans, and it's in Uganda. And that particular bank is set up. We have what we call someone who's the executive director of the bank, who runs it more from the faith-based Christian perspective. But then we also have what you would call like the regular president of a bank. And we also have a credit department that makes all of the credit decisions. They evaluate every loan application. So this is not just some, fly by night, let's kind of throw the money out here. There's a whole process and system, operations manuals that are this thick that are used. The loan officers are trained, and many of the people that come to work for us now in some of these countries actually come from some of the larger banks. They already have extensive loan experience. And by the way, the bank in Uganda is now approved by the Central Bank of Uganda. So Glotrans is in Uganda has now been approved. And to get approved by the Central Bank, you have to have capital requirements. The people that are doing the loans they have to have certain educational requirements. They have to have certain experience requirements. So when people ask about the risk, let me just say that in some cases, the risk is actually lower on some of these kind of loans because of the requirements that are necessary. Now, when it's the very poor that we want to bring up, the very poor, then we have a step down model that we use that has to do with that social collateral where we do it to groups. And so in the group lending piece, then there's a whole lot of education, a whole lot of empowerment, like the lady we talked about that did 6 loans. She became like the county commissioner in the village. Then in that case, those were more group loans, and she rose up through the group loans to where she actually qualified in those last 2 loans for an individual loan.
Yeah, and that's what I think it's important for you to really understand that they're under we lend to strategic partners, whether they're banks, microfinance institutions, savings institutions, or SACCOs, credit unions, and they do the onward lending to the clients. So they have their own process of collateralizing loans through property, through co-signing, so they secure those loans. We secure internally with our relationships through collateral debentures that covers assets. There's a whole system. And then they're also under government regulation, whether it's the Microfinance Act of the government or the Banking Act, their core capital, they have to do independent audits each year. They go through all of the auditing processes just like any bank here in America does.
Absolutely. They get audited every year. We should have addressed all that, I think, in the very beginning. But now we're at the end. We've been going over 45 minutes. And so one of the things I just want to say is we are planning on taking trips. That's another question, where we actually take investors, et cetera, with us. So we'll be informing you. If you get on our physical mailing list, I say physical, we have an email list you can subscribe to. But if you'd like to get here on the magazine, if you'd like to get on this, Tricord Global, if you'd like to get on this, you can call our office. So our office number is 720-416-4600. 720-416-4600. And then you can email the office at info@billyepperhart.com. You can also do it at info@tricordglobal.com. And so you can go to either one of those and contact. And so, David, and I appreciate you tuning in. I guess you don't call it that now. You call it that's old language, but we're kind of old, And but for tuning into the webinar.
Yeah, and I want to say I appreciate the questions that helps us in future webinars, blogs, emails. So where some of your questions are great, and some of those things will be addressed either directly or indirectly through our ongoing communications, which is important. So
very good. So thank you. Bye-bye.